Honduras, 100 days after only the second military coup in the Americas since the end of the Cold War. We're at a meeting of 68 candidates from the party of deposed President Manuel Zelaya. The proposal on the floor is to boycott the election unless he's returned to power. The vote is unanimous. There is an election going on in Honduras, but you'd hardly know it. Under a coup-installed government, the rights to free speech and assembly are suspended, and campaigning is virtually impossible. Pepe Lobo, the frontrunner in the race, is on a political tightrope. He supported the coup and is fiercely anti-Zelaya. But at the moment, the majority of the international community is refusing to recognize the election he's on track to win. If you're president of Honduras, which everyone expects you to be in a few months' time, will you have any legitimacy in the world community?
Well, tell them the elections are the solution, not part of these problems. Nobody can deny the people the right to elect whoever he wants.
No, that's a beautiful campaign slogan, but the problem is that the elections come after a military coup, and that's why the international community has said that the elections can't possibly be free and fair. The international observers are refusing to come.
You know what? People are totally innocent in this problem. They are going to the polls in November, they're going to vote, and they're going to decide.
Meanwhile, beyond the trappings of democracy in Honduras, here are the real signs of power. Outposts of U.S. corporations controlled by a tiny oligarchy. A handful of families who dominate the economy. They're used to deciding the fate of the country behind closed doors. ADOLFO FACUSSE, a leading member of one of those families, is holding court in an emergency meeting of the country's private sector roundtable. He's presenting his plan to break the impasse. Like most other proposals, it has Manuel Zelaya returning to the presidency for the final weeks of his term, but stripped of most of his power. With the international community back on board, November's elections would remove the stain of the coup and business as usual would resume. Visiting FACUSSE at his home, it's clear that the country's most powerful have little interest in changing the status quo.
We don't have a dictatorship. We don't have a military coup d'etat. There is no military running the show.
There was a process under Mel Zelaya where poor people were getting some small reforms and some voice in the political process, arguably for the first time ever. What is wrong with allowing those people to have a little bit more power in a desperately unequal society?
Well, I think that it's a good question. Zelaya wanted to do some changes. And to do that, instead of convincing us that what he was trying to do was good, he's tried to force us to accept his changes with the support of President Chavez of Venezuela.
The Micheletti government justified its takeover by claiming that Zelaya, coached by Chavez, was trying to change the constitution to stay in power. In fact, evidence for this theory is hard to find. The day Zelaya was removed, he was going to hold a non-binding public consultation on whether to have a vote on electing an assembly that would rewrite the Constitution, which would then be subject to another vote by the whole electorate. A debate about presidential term limits was many steps and months, if not years, away. So how did the power grab story become so widely accepted, even in the international media?
Because this guy was trying to pull a fast one. I mean, he was trying to stay in office a la Chavez, wasn't he?
Zelaya's term is coming to an end next year. Chavez convinced him to do as he himself had done in Venezuela.
This guy is acting extra-constitutionally. Yes, he was elected, but Hitler was as well, and Chavez also was.
The Micheletti regime and its backers have spent at least $400,000 US on PR and lobbying in the United States. Their allies are both Democrats and Republicans, some with a controversial history in the region. Roger Noriega, former Bush administration official, hardline anti-Castro voice. Lanny Davis, friend and one-time advisor to both Bill and Hillary Clinton, lobbying for the de facto government. Otto Reich, a key figure from the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s. And Jose Cardenas, former head of the largest Cuban-American lobby group in Washington.
I think Hugo Chavez understands if he fails in Honduras, that is going to be a mortal blow to his regional leadership aspirations. If it can happen in Honduras, then it can happen in El Salvador, it can happen in Nicaragua, and then it can happen in South America.
The Obama administration, for its part, has laid off the Cold War rhetoric and called for Zelaya's return, though its diplomatic measures against the coup government have been largely symbolic. More importantly, the endgame the White House has endorsed is much the same as the one backed by both lobbyists in Washington and the business elite in Honduras.
We're not taking sides against the de facto regime per se versus Zelaya. On the other hand, we want to get Honduras to a free and fair election so that you can get past this crisis and back to solving the problems of Honduras. That is the focus that we have.
Back in Tegucigalpa, if you look carefully, you can see what will be lost in this scenario. The movement's core demand, hidden in plain sight. The Constituyente, a new constitution, a refounding of the country on more equitable terms.
With the president and the presidency, or without him, no matter what. We need the new constitution. That's the fight. That's the main key.
It's a fight that Manuel Zelaya dropped shortly after being removed from power. For days, we'd been negotiating with the police to talk to Zelaya, but a face-to-face meeting was not going to happen.
All right, I'll call him myself.
President Zelaya, I'm happy to talk to you. I've been trying to get inside the embassy for a week. I think I'm about 50 meters from you, but this is as close as I can get. So thanks for taking our phone call.
Sí, muy bien. Mire, hoy tenemos 98 días de represión, de protestas, de torturas, de crímenes, de asesinatos que el régimen de facto ha hecho en contra del pueblo hondureño. Tengo el apoyo de la OEA, 34 países, el apoyo de Naciones Unidas, 192 países y el apoyo del pueblo. Los golpistas están cada vez más solos.
Why did you agree to drop the proposal for a constituent assembly, to reform the Constitution? Because that is what the social movements in this country are fighting for. Not for you just to return to power, but to genuinely change the rules of the game in Honduras.
La lucha tiene dos momentos. En este momento, nuestro principal objetivo es decirle no a los golpes de Estado. Si quitan un presidente, hay que volverlo a poner el presidente. Este es el principal objetivo de todos los presidentes de América, de toda Europa y de todos los presidentes del mundo. Decirle no al golpe de Estado, volviendo a restituir el presidente que ha sido quitado ilegalmente. Lo segundo que usted me dice, los procesos de transformación, esos son eternos, esos no se paran, esos son permanentes.
Forgive me, Mr. President, but you've been saying exactly that same line for 3 months now, and the United States has been silent for most of that time. I think we lost him. As we prepared to leave Honduras, negotiations began again. With the elections looming, the endgame was in play. But through the clouds of tear gas and political spin, some clarity is emerging from this long crisis. Even with Zelaya back in the presidential palace, his time would be brief, his power minimal. Even with the de facto government gone, the coup successfully prevented any great challenge to the established order. On the streets, social movements in Honduras are united as never before in their demand for a new constitution. But that demand has been all but silenced for now, not only by the police and military, but by the very diplomacy that will bring an end to the crisis.
No tenemos miedo.
And as international media leave the country, it's getting more and more dangerous for those who want to fight on. Our time in Honduras ended in the same way it started, another funeral. Mario Contreras, a teacher active in the resistance, was gunned down in front of his house. Witnesses described men on motorcycles with masks. Local media say it was a common robbery, but his brothers were not buying it. They say they were also sent a message within hours of Mario's murder.
En mi casa, una disparación a las 11 después del hecho de él, ¿verdad?
Mira, está ese hombre muerto. ¿Por qué? Porque la policía le quiso antojar, jalar la ametralladora y lo mató. Y no solo él, a ver cuántos más van a matar. Y a ese Michelete también lo vamos a ir a sacar de cualquier momento, y cualquier día, cualquier noche, cualquier rato. Así lo vamos a ir a sacar. Hombre, no, estoy hablando a él. No. Yo ya dije. Es peligroso para la verdad, yo ya lo dije. Ahí permítese.
Whatever story the world hears about elections and the transition back to democracy in Honduras, there will continue to be struggle, resistance, and loss. And there will still be people here who are living in fear.
Please tell all the world that is happening here, because we need somebody tells the truth. Because the other side say everything is okay here. That is not true. You know that is not true.